we're good to go.
All right, so I'll call the meeting to order. I've got 7:03 p.m. And Linda, I'm sure it doesn't need to be said, but I assume you're doing minutes? Okay, thank you. All right, so first order of business is approval of the minutes of the meeting of March 25th, 2021. I'll accept the motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
Anybody want to second it?
I don't have access.
Oh,
It's off the agenda. What does it tell you?
Yeah.
You can't get it?
Yeah. Yeah. It says you need access.
Request
this.
access.
Oh, it just came again.
Is there a button that says you can request access?
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
I got it.
Okay.
We have it. We still need a second. Just putting that out there.
I had to request access as well.
okay.
We'll work on that for next meeting to make sure that doesn't happen.
All right. Okay. So Krista, do you have access? Are you interested in seconding the motion?
Super interested. Yes, let's second that.
Okay. All right. Mike, do you have access to it now? Nope, not yet.
Hold on, let me see if I can do anything. I think Randy has to be the one that I can text her.
Okay.
Let me see what I can do. Nope, I can't even get in.
No,
What?
Move that to the next meeting.
yeah, we can.
So well, let me suggest this. Let me hold on a second.
If someone's in, can you see if you can share it with the other members?
Yeah, no, that's what I was trying to do, Bob.
Yeah, but you can't.
No, I clicked share and it requested that
Yeah.
I can have the person who owns it share it.
Then we'll have to put it off either to later in the meeting or at the next meeting if people can't read it.
I just got it now.
Okay, she must be
You
on
got
it.
Yeah, she just approved it.
Okay.
Perfect.
Krista, you're presenting. Oh, I get the I get the access. Okay, okay.
Ah,
Oh.
okay.
I'm looking at the agenda, not the oh, there's the draft minutes.
Oh, I'm muted. I'm talking. Did you want me to stop sharing?
Yeah, you can drive the boat.
Talking to myself. I'm sorry, what?
You can drive the boat. You've never heard that expression before? Drive the boat.
Oh, that's what you said. I was not coming through as words. Okay. So
Wow.
okay, go ahead.
Whoa! Wow.
That wasn't anything. Like I literally just wasn't hearing it correctly. It was me, not you.
Oh, man.
I promise. I
Boy.
promise.
Boy, wow. I should quit while I'm ahead.
No, oh my God. So do you
All
want me to like scroll down? What would be best?
I'm good now.
Okay,
Okay.
you guys are good. And you guys
Everybody's
have
got
all
access.
read it before, so okay.
Thank you, Krista.
Thanks.
Welcome.
Thank
All
you.
right. I'll give everybody a minute to take a quick look if they want.
For whatever it's worth, I'm waving the white flag while we're still early in this meeting. You know, I surrender.
No, right?
Just saying.
If anybody has any comments, let me know. I don't have an issue with them as I read it. although I do see some stuff I wanted to address. I'll put that off to the next meeting, actually. So, okay. Is everybody ready to move forward with the minutes? Yes. Okay. Seeing no other discussion, Linda,
Yes.
Krista,
Yes.
Mike,
Yes.
and I vote yes. So the minutes are approved in probably the most painful minute approval I've ever experienced, but it's all good. We'll get this back on track. All right. So the next thing is the 10-year capital plan. I assume you get, did you want to present that, or do you want us to try to follow along on
I
the
can-
spreadsheet?
Want me to put up, I'll drive the boat, Bob.
Thank you. Adam, it'd probably be better if we put it up, just to make sure everybody can get in. I just reshared it with everybody and made you all editors. So we could, if you can't get in it through the agenda, you can get in it through the link I just shared. We've met a couple times to work on this. Dan, myself, and our director of facilities, or our facilities manager, met today and put a couple hours in to do the final edits. I've met with Daryl to go through this. Dan and I have met previously to go through this as well. So this has been updated and revised since we last met. And we took some of your guidance from the last meeting where people asked, could you put some things in here that are under the threshold that you're still planning to do in the buildings? And we've added those in so that's included in the plan as well. How would you like to go through this? What would you like to have us do with you tonight?
So, me personally, I think the best thing to do would be to kind of run through, maybe just top to bottom, hit the highlights of any buildings, like what are the key big things.
Sure.
And as we go through, people can jump in with whatever other items they see under each building. But before we move on, does anybody else have any alternatives or any other way that you think we could run this, or anything you want to see highlighted?
You all seeing it, by the way?
Yep.
Yes.
Yes.
I would say either going year by year down or building by building, probably year by year would be best.
So why don't we just do year by year, and I'll just go up, top to bottom. How's that? And you can look at the bottom line for each project, and we can just highlight from 50,000 feet, and we can jump into something if you have any questions. How's that?
Okay.
Works for me. Thank you.
So the first one here is ECC central office, and yes, we're into April, but we're looking at some potential projects, and one thing that I think would be maybe a segue at the next meeting is that last night at finance, I did review the year and where we're at, where I think we're going to land the plane for this year. And unofficially, and this is very unofficial, where last night I presented to the committee a bottom line of about 713,000, but that was prior to, keywords prior to, working with Bob to do some adjustments between the general fund and federal grants, and that work is going to generate a minimum of another $250,000 to our bottom line in the general fund. That's important to state, because as we look at some of these projects here, and Bob and I were talking today with Jim Cavallo, and Daryl and I were talking a week or so ago when I was going through the numbers, is what of that bottom line can we use to tackle what would in essence be a one-time project. And I'm here in the office, so there's no one sitting next to me to kick me in the shin. So any of you can give me the virtual kick in the shin at any point in time, it's okay. We're all friends here. So so that being said, that quick introduction, we're looking at a couple of projects. I heard a ping. Is that a question already?
No, I think feedback, Dan.
Okay, sorry. So over at ECC, the big project over there is about 360K, and that's a pretty serious investment, and I mean in a good sense, to tackle a long standing issue over there, if need be. Secondly, again looking at, I know that says capital funds. Potentially it could be something that we tackle. We split maybe between the general fund and a federal grant. And again, we have nothing definitive on ESSER 3 yet, but we know that it's coming and that it could be of significant cash. So then, looking at about $60,000 to do some work with the boiler and the univents here in the building for an estimated total of about $420,000.
And if I can add to that, that 60,000, we've already begun that in our ESSER, our Essential Schools Reopening Grant. Our ESSER 2 grant is funding that, most of that. So that's already underway, and that's providing, there was no airflow to certain parts of the central office, the downstairs business office, the secondary world SPED office, where a lot of the other folks are in, and where the directors of SPED exist in an old conference room. So now we're going to have airflow to all those areas, as well as we had to move a classroom in ECC, our physical therapy classroom, from upstairs down to the curriculum center, and it's providing airflow to that area as well. So we're up and running. It's still got some final duct work that'll happen, and that's scheduled for this weekend, but that's essentially been paid for out of the grant. So that's why I put local funds. I probably should have called it grant funds there.
But we should point out, if I recall, Bob, correctly, and I'll stand corrected here, that's something that we upfronted the cost, and we're going to be doing a journal. Is that one of those items that we'll be doing a journal from the general fund into the grant?
Yep.
Okay. All right. So the estimated total for those two projects there is approximately $420,000, and again, to be determined. Scrolling down, going to skip through the high school, going to get down to Central Tree Middle School, and again, something that you're going to see throughout this review here is security work. It's funny, when we were talking today, I said to Bob and to Jim, this is the Facilities and Security Subcommittee, and we've got some work to do in a number of our buildings relative to installing security systems. So you're going to see this 50K in this review in a couple of places for sure.
And the reason I highlighted it in yellow was to bring it up to this group's attention and to maybe get some feedback from you. So there's a couple ways we could go. This was put on the facilities plan, I think, because of this committee and some of the discussions you've had previously. It was scheduled to happen this fiscal year. We still have in front of us, as Dan mentioned, our ESSER 3 grant, which they haven't given us the date yet, but they keep indicating it'll be sometime soon in the next few weeks. And so that's what I wanted the group to be able to discuss is this something that's important enough that you would like us to try to see if we could fund it with the grant or partly fund it? Or is this something we wanted to move into next year and have as a top priority for next year? So that's why I highlighted, you'll see all of them in yellow. There's several of them as we go down through these schools. And that's why I wanted it to draw your attention to. They're all highlighted in yellow.
So I think before we answer that, is this kind of a single cohesive installation? Like we get a benefit if we hit all of these at the same time? Or would it be the same amount if we did some this year, some next year, and it would just be split up?
Adam, it's not like buying maybe PCs or a whole bunch of phones, for instance, where you get a discount on quantity. They have to come in each case, and it has to be designed to fit that building and where the office is and where the electricity is associated, all that stuff. So it's going to be designed by each building. I wouldn't say that there's a benefit to saying we're going to do them all. Some towns might have more resources as well, maybe coming from this next chunk of money that I'm referring to as ESSER 3. It comes to the schools, also comes to the towns. They might be able to step up and do it. Some towns won't have as much, and maybe they have other projects that are going to use that money for. So it could be a variety of funding sources for this. And it could go into next year, I guess is what I'm saying.
Okay.
So again, here we are, chalk set 50K, just scrolling down to Thomas Prince, another 50K. I'm not ignoring the 50K for the water system, but just wanted to highlight that, as Bob stated, Paxton Center, here we are again, another 50K project. So as you can see, here we are, Dawson, 50K for the project. So this is in essence across the board, and it's a priority at some point in time to tackle this. Clearly, it's a need in all the buildings, and hopefully, between these various sources, funding sources between the district and the towns, that this project could happen sooner than later. And again, here we are, Davis Hill, 50K, Naquag, 50K, Glenwood, 50K. So it's across the board. It's across the board. I'm gonna scroll back up.
Sure.
Go ahead. Yeah. I can't see. I'm sorry. When I'm presenting here, I can't see. So
Mike, go ahead.
I just wanted to review, or basically get a reminder before we go too far into this. So these are, capital would be from the district, local would be from the towns, right? And then
Other way around, Mike.
nope.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So locals from the district.
Our
General.
local school budget, and
Yeah.
maybe
Okay.
I should have phrased that differently. Our local
Okay.
school budget, yeah, and internally we refer to that as the local budget, as opposed to a budget that's outside the schools. We'd have to chase down.
For the majority of the items on this plan, are those estimate placeholders, or are these numbers based on something that's been quoted and priced out?
In most cases, those are estimates. In a few rare cases, and I can point those out, those are actually based on work that's been done or is being completed, or a cost estimate that we've received.
Okay, if you could just have a note or let me know which work's
Sure.
already been
Yep.
priced out. Thank you.
All right, so I had skipped the high school, got down to Central Tree, and again, the 50K there. Chalk set, again, the same 50K. And moving down to Thomas Prince, 50K, but I'll stop here. We're also estimating over at Thomas Prince, 50,000 for a new water system up there at the building, and that's not a hard number. That's an estimate that Jim Cavello provided us earlier today.
And that's something we have in our plan, but it was something that the town of Princeton was told they needed to change. So essentially, water comes into a storage shed in two large vats and is stored there, and they're being told it has to be stored within the building, and this is some sort of bladder system that has to be in place in the building. This is really not us. It's up to the town. They deliver the water to us, but we figured because it's part of the school and it's something that has to be done, we included it in here. This is not something that we're actively chasing down. The town is the one that is getting the what has to be done and the bids and all that stuff, but it's in here. So this one of maybe most of the projects is very much town centric. It's not really us. You can continue, Dan.
Paxton Center School, about $45,000 to do some work on the heating system over there.
That's the work that's been done. That was the work that was done earlier this year, where we had the compressor put in there. This is the work that the town of Paxton contributed $34,000 towards. So that's why it says local/town. It was both them and us that made this happen, and so that's already been expended. That's a completed project.
Bob?
Yep.
I was just wondering if you happen to know how old that equipment that was replaced was.
Oh my goodness. It was pretty ancient. A lot of the lines, once we got in and we only explored a few different locations, and the lines had gotten so hard and brittle, we had to replace all the lines in there. The compressor itself was essentially worn out. It could not give us what we needed out of that. So there's a new compressor in that building as well. So
Thank you.
yeah, it was, yeah.
So moving down to Dawson, we've talked about this at previous meetings, but this is probably number one, aside from the HVAC work that is either happened or is happening or scheduled to happen. This is our priority. Again, there's one bathroom in the building for the students over there. We're estimating this at $200,000, and again, we've got it in both years. In 22 as well. If we don't get it done in 21, then it clearly it's got to happen in 22. And Bob has offered to various folks, hey, come on over, I'll give you a tour, and you can see what it's like. At noontime when the kids, during lunch or whatever. I mean, did I miss anything with that one, Bob?
It's not a total cost. Just so everybody understands, 400,000. So we would, if it doesn't happen this year, I'm deleting it from this year. It's just a total cost of 200. Dan's point is he wanted you to see that if it slid to next year, the 200,000, it would be the number one priority we'd have, or one of the number ones for next year as well. It's that important. It impacts the kids being able to be in the classroom. It cuts back on the instructional time because they're having to wait so long to get into the bathrooms. So it does have a major impact on learning in that building. It's just not inconvenient for kids, and it is very inconvenient if you see the kids there, and some of them are clearly in distress waiting in line that long.
On the funding for that, is that just balanced out over 2 years, or is it going to take the 2 years to complete?
No, we've gone in and identified locations. It's not too far away from existing drains and water sources. There would have to be some cutting of the slab to extend drains and that type of thing. But it's not like it'll take the building down for an extended period of time. If we're going to do it this summer, we got to get on it pretty quick. So if we have identified money, then we need to jump on that pretty quick and get people in there. It can be done in a summer. It's that kind of job, but it can't be done in 2 weeks,
Are we looking at funding that either with our funds or through a grant, or are we gonna send that back to the town of Holden?
I met with a few representatives from the town of Holden, the Department of Public Works manager, I think the assistant town manager, and somebody else, the town engineer or somebody, and brought this up to them. They weren't aware it was this dire of a situation down there. They said they would entertain trying to move it up on their list of priorities. They said they didn't have a ready funding source right now, that the funding source was going to some other projects we're going to get to in just a minute here that you'll see in terms of HVAC. They said they'd be more than willing to look for additional funding sources. So maybe when the ESSER 3 money comes in, it could be used for this. Maybe it's going to be something where we work with the town and we chip in some and they chip in some from some of these grant funds. Or maybe, as Dan and I talked today, like we've done with some other projects, when we found out the amount of work that needed to be done in Paxton, even though it was exceeding that threshold of who owns the project, we just got it done. So maybe in this case, this might be a thing where we get it done up front, and then we look for who could work to help reimburse us on this after the fact. It's that dire of a situation.
Yeah, no, I agree with that assessment of it. So, okay.
Here's the big one, the 400,000. This is being done right now by the town of Holden. This is on their multi-year plan. It's that huge document I shared at the last meeting. It's happening right now for Mayo School. They're completely redoing the entire HVAC for the building, the head end, the controllers, the thermostats, how it's all operates in there. So it's being upgraded, and especially the head end, the control unit, the energy management system is all being brought up to code now, and then some. It's all online. So that's what's in that money there, and they're doing a quality job. They've got an outside firm that's got the specs. And the engineers are involved in that, so it's off and running. That's nothing to do with us or our money. It's where their building plan is going to intersect our long-term capital plan here.
Okay.
David Sale again, the security system and cameras over there, again, $50,000. The same out at Naquag, Glenwood, Holton. There's one item out at Holton, and we spoke to Jim about this today, looking to do some work with the water heater. And this is something that if we didn't tackle this year, that we would tackle in FY22 and just come out of the general fund under the building repair.
Yeah, over the summer we have to do that. Essentially, what's happened is they've redone the main water storage tank and the heater of that, and that sits sort of in the middle of this Houghton Choxit complex. And a lot of that water is used in the cafeteria and the bathrooms that are associated there. The water heater that's at the the Houghton end of the complex essentially is dead. So what they're looking to do is they would bring the supply lines back to this main water heater. When they installed it, they installed something that was large enough that it could take over for the water heater there. And that's what they'd be looking to do here. Go ahead, Jeff.
So the just scrolling down to the bottom here for FY21, 1.6 million, and remember that of that 1.6, 400,000 is currently being spent by the town of Holden for the work up at Mayo, and the better part of 40,000 up above for Paxton Center School, and already done. And again, the common denominator as well in here is the security system in all the buildings. So piece of change right there for sure. So before I go into 22, any questions? I hope we didn't go too fast.
Oh, not sure if you can see it. I put a comment in the chat, Dan. I was wondering if you could mute your mic when others are speaking, because I'm getting a lot of feedback.
Sorry about that. Actually that came up last night.
It's just making it a little difficult. Thank you very much.
Linda, you have a question?
Yeah, so I know we've kind of skipped over the high school. Under the high school and the ECC, I saw the capital and the local funds still, but given that they're district-owned buildings, I was curious about how that is, how does that get split up? Because that's where I thought it got a little, I don't know, different than the other buildings.
Correct. The district owns the ECC and the high school. So if we had a large project, let's say that a roof was gone on one of those and it was like $1 million project, then what we would have to do is to put that out. And the towns would all have to vote that they're going to assume some cost associated. If they didn't have a choice in it, we'd be telling them essentially, here's what you have to do, and we'd appropriate the whatever the thing is there. Like they had to do some oil remediation. It wasn't an optional thing a few years back. The towns all had to take a part of that cost on. So that's how that would work. In this case, what we're looking to do is not to put it out to the towns. When we're looking up here at the ECC, the 360,000 that's in there, we're looking to see if we have resources that we could mobilize this year to get either some of that done or all of that done. That's what we're looking to do, and that puts a lot of pressure on Dan, because if we're going to say we're going to expend that money, then he's got to make sure that with all the other accounts that there's more than enough to be able to, as he says, land the plane. In other words, end with at least $1, at the end of the year. We can't have some surprise hit us in late June that we weren't expecting, and suddenly there's not enough reserves left for that.
So then, for the purposes of this document, the local funds means that was for looking for a way for grants to cover it, and capital, that's where you would look to put it out to the towns as sharing the load.
It could be. Maybe a better way to look at it is local might be money that we have available on the local school budget or the school budget. Capital could be that we're asking the towns. It could be that we're going to write a grant ourselves to try to cover the cost. It could be we'll split the cost between a grant we write and the grant the town writes. Or it could be, in some cases, like a few years ago when you put the resodding of the football field out there, that it ends up being some sort of short-term borrowing, or E&D is used for it, something in that. But capital means it's not what's in our typical school budget. We'd have to look elsewhere for that. The agreement says that if it costs more than X dollars and the town owns the school, then they have to take it on themselves. In this case, with these district-owned buildings, we'd have to be a little more creative in how we would get that to work out.
So
then you don't have.
Means, I'm just going to ask a quick question on that, Linda. The local means the physical buildings, like budget for maintenance and operations, right?
It does, or it could be a district-owned account. It doesn't have to be a school-owned or repair account. In some cases,
okay.
For instance, I talked earlier about how in Choxet, Houghton, we had to replace a boiler, and that was some using local funds, so that was inflated for that year. Doesn't mean they're going to need that every year, so that chunk of money might show up doing a project in another school. So
the other thing too, if I can define local, we talked about this briefly today, is that some of the buildings may have building rental money. Not that there's a heck of a lot of money there, but I know that Mount View for a number of years had a church group that was renting space over there, and they built up a pretty decent fund balance. And I'm not pleased. I'm not by no means saying that we're looking to deplete Eric's balance in there. Not at all. But if there was a project at Mount View and we were looking for maybe a couple of grand, certainly a building rental account would be a very appropriate use of how to expend those dollars if we were in a bit of a pinch for that particular building. But again, those dollars would be dedicated solely to that building and into that project over there, whatever it might be.
Okay. Linda, I'll go back to you, and then Mike.
I just had one other follow-up on that same topic. So when we have the towns, we have that hard and fast threshold, but for the district-owned buildings, it's more of what the project is. There's not like a hard number that tips it over into, we've got to look at these other ways of doing it. Okay, thank you.
You are correct, ma'am.
All right, Mike.
I had a specific question in regards to the ECC. Now, I do understand it's a very old building and needs a lot of work. However, I also, and I don't really know the status of it, but I do hear people talking about us getting a new building, which I understand might be far-fetched. So I'd like you to speak to weighing out the costs with replacing the building, because if I scroll down to the 10-year total, we're at $2.5 million, almost 2.6.
I think what we're looking at here, at least for this year that we've gone through, and maybe this won't give you the complete answer for all of that, but at least for this year, we have to have those air handlers working in those buildings. They are absolutely on their last legs. They're
Okay.
shaking, they're making noise. This is something I think we've got to do, even if that building's just there for another 2 or 3 years. Unfortunately, there's no building project that's on the books right now. If I said, look, we just got to limp until, 2023 or something, there's no building project. It takes a while to get a building in place. I was lucky in a previous job that I was in. We were able to fast track something, but it still was 3.5 years. They typically say to set aside 5 to 6 years for that. This is not something that will last that long. We're lucky we're going to made it this far, and I'm hoping we make it to the end of the year with those things shaking and rattling the way they are. It's just that has to get done. Long term, some other projects, yeah, maybe we need to think about are we going to upgrade this or that, or is this something we're going to put on hold? I think it would help if we had a building project on the books that included an early childhood center, in it. It could be also long term that maybe the preschool ends up going somewhere else, but where's the central office going to exist? And so it could be that we're still using that older building for 10 or more years, because that's where the central office will end up just staying.
So
Okay.
before this meeting is done tonight, I'll bet you a coffee that you're going to hear some jiggling here, and trust me, it's not Jacob Marley making a guest appearance at Facilities and Securities. It's the HVAC system here, and it's a pretty scary sound. It's rickety rockety. It's actually pretty awful, and frankly, I hope that you do hear it, because if you're hearing it here in my office here, you can imagine what's going on next door. And then to Bob's point, with the building project, I mean, Darryl and I, we looked at that like a year ago, and we were going to submit what's called a statement of interest. It didn't happen. Typically, a statement of interest, Mike, into the group, that would be available by the Mass School Building Authority right after the holidays, and typically they would be due right about now. And they get reviewed by MSBA. You go before a board, and with any luck, you'd be starting a project about 6 months to 8 months later. We haven't even gotten that far. So a building project, let's just say, I think I'll probably be retired. There truly is a need, and to Bob's point, and Darryl has mentioned this to me, I think we have to look long and hard at taking some one-time savings, because we're not going to have the savings in next year's budget the way we had this year. The buses didn't run for 4 months, and we don't need to rehash that. You all know what's going on. No pressure here at all. No pressure. We need to look long and hard at that for ECC. There's no question about that.
Okay. Thank you. You did answer all my questions. I'm not looking at skipping out on the HVAC needs of ECC. I just wanted to hear what from administration, if there was a plan, or if we're dedicated to getting everything up and running. And I heard you loud and clear, so thank you.
Linda?
Just while we were talking about the statement of interest, I saw that it was opened up for submitting a statement of interest for a building project. So I don't know if that's within our radar, because this is a different timeline than normal, I thought, for that it's opening up like in a couple weeks instead of over the holidays, right? So I don't know if that's on the radar at all or what, but since it came up.
For a regional, Linda, we very much have to be in step with the towns. So both sides have to be on board with this is what we want to do. It's a little different than if we were a department of a city, for instance, or if we only had one town that we were with, then I think it would be a little clearer on how it was going to work. But as a regional, so if the town, for whatever reason, is not on board with that, you know, that could hold it up.
All right, I'll put it back up.
Yes, sir.
Just to throw my 2 cents in on FY21. I mean, if we're able to do the security systems, I don't see a reason not to do it now. Honestly, I mean, if we've got the money, if it's just going to go and sit in E&D for another year and a half or 2 years before we can use it. I mean, this is something that it's been a priority for, this subcommittee and, even before this subcommittee was formed. So, I think it does make sense to increase it beyond just the 1 or 2 cameras we have now in every school. So I think it definitely makes sense. Mike?
Yes, I was just wondering for things that are currently either in the works or about to happen, do we already have vendors picked out, or do those go out to bid? What's the process in that? I'm not sure how it works.
So for the projects that we already are working on, there's people that are doing those, and we've gone through Dan on all those projects. There's different thresholds that if a project's above this or below that, we have some people that we have existing contracts that can do things for us, like plumbing, some of those things, some electrical sort of work as well. Bigger projects, like when you were looking at the ECC, and that's 360 we're anticipating, that's something where Dan would do a formal project work. That wouldn't be where we're just telling someone, hey, get going on that. It has to be, we have to go and do it the right way. Dan knows all the details. He does a great job with that. They hold openings all the time and awarding of projects. So Dan, you want to chime in?
Yeah, we'll just stay with that for a second, Bob. So, again, the estimated cost there is $360,000. Have to put out a formal IFB, invitation for bid. There are some very rigid timelines. And Mike, you may be familiar with some of this stuff, given what you do. I don't want to speak for you, but if we were to do that, as I think George Allen said, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, the future is now. We'd have to jump on that fairly soon. I think one thing that we'd have to look at is maybe splitting the project over 2 years, tackling it like tomorrow, beginning the work. We'd have to work out a schedule too, in terms of getting the work done. Not interfere with next door, and the kids, the staff, and then probably wrapping up during the summer. So that's something that we're going to need to look at long and hard, frankly, now.
Okay, thank you.
All right, let's move on.
All right, FY22, again, staying with ECC and central office, about $17,000, looking to do some work with the PA system. And I think, Linda, you had asked this question in an email maybe a month or so ago. Don't hold me to the exact time. So that's something that we could probably tackle over the summer. LED lighting, and you're going to see this in a number of the buildings as well. And we'd have to upfront the cost initially, but there would be a payback, if you will, in about 2 to 3 years max. And this is something that is long overdue in a number of our buildings for sure. there anything there, Bob, or just move on down?
We're good.
All right. At the high school, again, making an investment of about $52,000. Again, this could be a borrowing through the general fund, and a multi-year borrowing, perhaps a 3 or 4 year lease that we would engage in to get a much needed piece of equipment over at the high school. The lighting at the turf field. This was something that we actually struggled with a couple years ago. As you know, when we did the field over, and one of the problems that we had then and still do is the lighting at the field is in dire need of replacement. There are some bulbs that are out, but the lighting needs to be upgraded. And at that time, the number that was quoted was about $10,000, $10,000 to $15,000, and you kind of look back. It's like if you're building a house and you say, well, if I put another small bathroom, it's another $10,000. But over 30 years, it's $30 a month, and that's one of those things that maybe we should have and we could have, but we didn't. So that's important, and I would argue too that there's also a safety factor there in terms of the lighting at the field. Parking, the parking lot up there. Again, we would look to convert the lighting up there to LED lighting, and though it says local funds. I'm sure that that the high school does have a separate revolving account for parking fees, and again, I'm not looking to spend Mr. Biendo's money whatsoever, but this would certainly be an appropriate use of some of that money to do the LED conversion of the parking lot over at the high school. The bleachers, they are in need of repair. We're estimating that at about $40,000. And then scrolling down, again, upgrading the paging system at the high school, $15,000. And as you know, when you look at our budget, you see the appropriation, operations, and maintenance. So these costs here. These would be what I would call the targeted cost to use some of those funds that particular year. And again, this paging system would probably be a summer project to get it up to par for the start of the school year.
Dan, Mike's got a question for you.
Okay, thank you.
Is it Dan? You can't see the screen because you're presenting. Is that right?
Yeah, I can't see it,
okay.
Mike. I can't.
Okay. Two questions. One is, what exactly is the paging system? And two would be the lighting. So the lighting is a concern. The lighting for the outdoor lighting for parking lots and whatnot, will those be on either a photovoltaic switch or some sort of timer?
I think they are now.
Okay.
They're either on one or the other. I can't answer that specifically, but they do go off. It's not like we have to turn them off. The paging system is, we've got this antiquated PA system in there that we use to make announcements and all calls and that people can hear in classrooms, in the cafeteria, outside the building. It's proprietary. It's kind of DOS-like, and it's gone down twice this year. And both times, half the building suddenly can't hear the bells to know when the classes are done. And even more concerning than that is they can't hear if there's an announcement, such as shelter in place or something like that. So we have to get this system. We have to replace it. We've tried to repair it. They had some old system they took out of somewhere else, and they resoldered cards and put it in and at least got the thing running. And we're just at that point. I mean, we're a professional organization. We have a $100 million budget. Yeah, we got to replace it and move on and get something that works.
So the reason I ask is because what's the difference between the PA system and the paging system? Are those the same thing?
Yeah, it depends on the school. In this school, I believe they're all the same. There's a large amp that pushes through and it goes through some circuitry that turns things on and off based on if you dial a certain number, you're going to get this room or you're going to get this wing or you're going to get the whole school or you're going to get the outside speakers. And that's what's given us issues.
Okay.
Yeah, it's,
That's all.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
Alrighty. Mount View, when they rebuilt the building a couple years ago, there was a need for a portable lift, and as Jim said, in the gym they have challenges trying to replace lights or clean and really for short money, and this $8,000 would be a used item. Certainly, if we can find something maybe for a couple bucks more, that's new, certainly. But this is something that's long overdue. And again, it was just this is my term now, but kind of a casualty of the budget for the building project. It didn't happen, but it probably should have happened. Central Tree, they're looking to upgrade the phone in the intercom system up there. I don't know if this committee recalls, but we had an issue a couple years ago in one of the buildings where, like, a week before school started, that the phone system went down, and so seize the opportunity to make these upgrades in our telecommunications when we can, because they're all very old, and when they crash. It's very difficult to get parts to either to repair some of this equipment.
Mike, did you have a question?
I think that was up from before. Thanks.
Okay.
Alrighty, so over at Chalkset and Hulton, there is carpeting throughout the building. It's very old carpeting, for sure. And what we'll be looking to do is to tackle that. And again, that's something that if the funds were there, that would be a summer project, or it would be a type of project that you would tackle during an extended break, perhaps like during the Christmas recess. You'd have to get a crew in there, and knock that out throughout the building.
So,
Go ahead.
100,000 here, and there's 100,000 in Houghton. This is absolutely something that we would talk to the town of Sterling about. In the past, they've asked us if there were any projects that we deemed that they needed to kind of look at that were that high of an importance. One of the principals has told the old town manager that it was the carpets, so I don't quite know where we stand with that. We'll have to resurface those conversations or restart those conversations and go from there.
so is the total 200?
Yep.
But okay.
And that's an approximate. We don't. That's not based off of an estimate in any way.
So here we are again. This is the LED lighting conversion that I spoke about up above, and again, you're going to see this throughout. And again, the initial cost is somewhat significant, with return on the investment in 2-3 years max. And again, this is something that is whose time has come. I'll be honest with you. I've actually done this in another district, and that was a couple of years ago. I don't know. Dare I say? You can throw the virtual fastball at me, but I think one lesson that we've learned with the pandemic is that our buildings needed a lot of TLC. And where there's an opportunity now to address these issues either through grants or through town capital funds or one-time savings. My recommendation would be that we tackle these as best we can when we can, because we're not going to have the opportunity anytime soon, after the next year or two. That was probably an editorial. I apologize, but I've just seen the work that Bob and Jim has done, and I'm it's kind of the cheerleader in the background. Again, stuff is very much needed. Alrighty, and if I'm going too fast, again, stop me. I can't see any hands being raised with the screen up.
Linda has a question.
Linda, I think you
Go
have
ahead.
one.
Thank you.
Just to go back to the Houghton Chocolate carpet part, given the soft surfaces angle, is that something that the ESSER money might be able to work with? And then I had another question, but that was the main one.
Yeah, they're pretty loose. They've gotten looser on what the restrictions are. We can certainly address, there's a few ones that might fit under. One is under general building cleanliness and safety, but there's also a catch-all that, at least for the ESSER 2 that was in there, it said funds are being used to meet a priority of a building principle. So I could fit it in under that. There were like 16, I think, different categories. I had to classify every expense under one of those 16, and then leave a little short statement as to how it fit under there. So I believe we can make it work.
And then I remembered the other question. So would you be looking at, for all of these, when it says FY22, do you mean like this July, or would it realistically be next winter, next June, that it could be tackled?
Some of these would be for the summer, and some of them the bigger projects would be dependent on the person that we award this to, their availability. That was a big thing that we found over this past year. We had work we needed to get done. We wanted to open schools, and the guy can't get in for 6 weeks or 8 weeks, or the part isn't available for, a month. And so it's that dance a little bit more so than ever.
Can I make a suggestion just to put on the back burner? At least when we talk about Houghton and Choxet, it might be helpful to have them closer together on the document, since the buildings are connected and it's one town. That would be, so it looks like it's just 100,000 at a time, but Sterling is looking at 200,000 potentially. So just for the future, that might be useful.
Yeah, I think this document was originally set up to break it up by grade bands. So there's the middle schools, and Choxet's in with the middle schools, and then there were the K-8s, and they're above the elementaries, and then Houghton's in the elementaries. So yep, we can.
That's correct. That's how I set it up. That's all. I get it. Makes sense. All good.
Grouping by town might make it an easier plan for the towns. Okay.
Okay. Thomas Prince, again, the phone system, and again, something that you're gonna see as we go through this is that there's going to be a recurring theme about a couple of items: security system one, a phone system or a PA system number two, and number three, again, the LED project, converting the building and also the parking lot. Again, upfronting the cost, but the payback within 2 to 3 years. Rekeying the building. This is something. Go ahead, Bob.
This is something that the town wants done and is taking on. So that wasn't something that we have to worry about. But it's on our list because it's something that's being done to improve the building. So that's something they asked for with their own internal audit, and they want to get done. So they're off on that and running with it.
Paxton Center School, believe it or not, there is no alarm system up there at all. And this is something that we would have to tackle. We will tackle this summer in a summer project. Again, LED lighting for both the building and the parking lot. And again, upgrading, installing a new phone and PA system up there as well.
Mike, go ahead.
What kind of alarm system are you talking about? I would sure hope you're not talking about a fire alarm system.
No, security alarm.
Okay,
good.
thank you.
Yep.
I knew it
same
wouldn't fly
question.
to not have that, so I wanted to find out what it was.
Yeah,
Thank
and
you.
it's just enough to get us in the game so that if somebody comes in one of the doors, it shows the motion. It's not, and that's all I'll say.
Is this something that for Paxton makes sense to roll into the security system and cameras funding line, or
Yep,
are they?
it would absolutely be that. I think in terms of transparency and trying to get you guys to understand, some of these things are broken out. Same thing with the LEDs. The reason we broke that out initially, when I was given the total cost, is that seems like kind of a lot. And then I was told, well, I can break out the parking lots, and if we have enough money, we'll do the parking lots, because that would be a second tier sort of thing. We don't get as much savings. So that's why those are broken out into two there as well. So just so you understand, we can certainly combine things together. Some of the towns, Holden for one, when we've talked to them before, they've said, well, why don't we lump all this together and then we'll put it before the voters and we'll call it this or that. And, you know, that's kind of how they've approached things in the past. Other towns, they don't want to do that quite as much, but so we're willing to do anything. But in terms of you guys who are sitting here and need to know these details on the inside, you know, it's very detailed like this and broken out individually.
Okay.
All set?
Yep.
Alrighty, again, back at Dawson, and again, the bathroom, if this wasn't to happen, you know, prior to the end of the year, again, we put it as number one, and as Bob mentioned earlier, the cost, the estimated cost is $200,000, not $400,000, but it's there to just stress the urgency and the importance of this project. So again, kind of sound like a broken record, but again, to update the lighting in the building and also the parking lot. But the EMS, again, this is Bob, if I recall, this is part of the project that the town will be working on, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, it's could be part of theirs if they realize enough savings at Mayo. It could be that the extra money could go towards this, and the same thing with Davis Hill. You'll see in a minute. It's the same thing. It's a few cards being added in different software, and suddenly it allows us remotely to be able to get in and access what's going on. It's not necessarily getting in and rewiring anything or putting in whole new head ends or anything. It's to manage the energy of the building. It allows our guy to be able to see when he's at home or in another building what's going on. If someone says, I don't hear any noise or my room's freezing, you can get in and see what's not working or what's closed and should be opened or all those things.
And if I can just speak to that real quickly, again, in a previous district, we had an EMS system, and it's actually pretty cool because, as Bob said, you know, you can be home sitting, you know, with your laptop, and you can be checking the heat in a certain classroom, whatever, in the building. And remotely you can control that, and it's pretty cool, state of the art stuff for sure. Alrighty, Mayo again, about 28,000 to do the conversion for both the building and the parking lot to LED lighting. This is what Bob mentioned a moment ago about the the upgrade in the building. They've got a tractor issue as well over at Davis Hill. Estimated cost approximately $40,000. Again, if that weren't to be paid through capital, then maybe it's something that gets picked up in local money. But again, we're looking at one for the high school as well. So we have to probably flip a coin to see which building gets a tractor that particular year. The lighting, again, the combined number is about $28,000 for both the building and the parking lot. NAQUAG, again, $5,000 for the parking lot upgrade to LED lighting. Same as Glenwood. So this is the other piece, Linda, of the carpeting project over at Houghton and Chalkset. Their cost, Houghton's cost for the upgrade of LED lighting. Then bringing us down to the bottom of a little bit over $1 million in FY22. Any questions?
Mike's got a question. Yeah.
We're not going through all 10 years tonight, are we?
No, I could summarize the outlying years by these different cost centers if you want, real quickly. We could
Okay.
just go down to each cost center. I think it's important to understand at least what we're trying to do this summer right now with money, and then next year what's in the budget and what we're trying to do. And then I can just sort of summarize the outlying years there.
You want to do that now, Bob? And I think we've, and I don't want to speak for the group, but I think we've kind of touched upon the two big years, either the end of 21 and 22. And
Sure.
And we can give a 50,000-foot overview, if you'd like, of the balance. It sounds like that's unanimous there from the head nods that I'm seeing. Feeling the love here, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much.
If you bring it up, Dan, and you scroll through, we'll start with central office, and so we'll just look at some of those outlying years there. There's an access system that lets people into the building. Right now, it's in the central office. It's spotty on the ECC side, so that's out there. The boiler is going to need some work in outlying years as well. We've begun to change the controllers of the univents. We will need to finish that work and get it into a more robust system, and that's what's out there as well. But it would at least control any new univents that are brought in, what's in there. But there's a lot of units that should be mounted in a panel that are sort of hanging out in this room. Anyways, that would need some work. That's essentially ECC. There's some window work down the road, but that would really be way down the road if we're going to continue to use it. The high school, there's some pretty substantial work here around the track and the tennis courts that are out there. You can see in FY23, we would start to need to plan that out and work. Probably you guys would have to work with the maybe the finance subcommittee to sort of figure out how are we going to do that. Is it short-term borrowing, long-term? Is it going to be using E&D to do this? The high school does not have an alarm system that works. They have the remnants of an old alarm system. Some wire work was done a few years back, but nothing has been interconnected. So at some point, and that's a jumbled mess, that needs to be completely redone and done so that it can work as one unit, not this. Some parts of the building have no wiring, some have this old wiring, some parts they don't know where the wiring goes or where it ended up. So that's out there. That's kind of a big thing. In outlying years is to begin to replace some of the oldest rooftop units. These are these very large things. They're bigger than a car and probably heavier too, and replace one at a time each year. And that's what the 300,000 is. It means we have to bring a crane in to get these things up and get the old ones off. And so those are in some outlying years. And then there's some money to start to replace the 100 different exhaust vents we have and bring them with a newer motor, or if we need to get something that's a little better that sits up on the roof. So we've got 25,000 a year for a couple of years there to try to address those as a big thing. In the high school, the main control panels for the electric, that's something that needs to get addressed, and there's $1 million in there to do that. That's something down the road, but it absolutely needs to be done. I've been told that people are inside that building during like a basketball game and the lights go out and those types of things, and it's all based on this, the way it's set up in the panels. It has something to do with when they did the remodeling, it wasn't upgraded the way it should have been, and as a result, we're suffering through now with all the fallouts. Mike, what do you want to say there?
So is this power distribution? Is this what exactly?
Yes, it's all of that. It has to do with the main panel. It has to do with the distribution. It's going to require a lot of rerouting of things. It's pretty involved, but it at some point needs to get done. It just does.
Thank you.
Unfortunately, I think we're kind of paying the penalty of maybe some earlier projects where they, as Dan has mentioned earlier, should have spent a little bit more money there, and instead it's now in our laps here. So
there's a saying when it comes to projects, especially municipal projects, and that's if you don't do it right the first time and put the money up front, you're going to pay for it 4 times over.
and that's kind
unfortunately due to the nature of the beast with having limited funds. Sometimes that's how it works. You end up paying for it over the course instead of all up front.
Yep. Mike, you asked me earlier about how what numbers here are pretty solid. That 200,000 for the LED was 197. It even went down to the pennies. It was based off a quote that we got this year for it. We moved it out a few years and just rounded it off to 200,000. So that's a pretty solid number that's in there. And that's essentially what it is. The clocks, the intercom, and the phones in the high school. That's another project that's out there as well, and that's the 225. The curtains in the gym and the field house, that's out there. So those are some bigger things that are kind of hanging around with the high school. On our end, since we control this, we could lump some of these things together and maybe try to do some borrowing that would hit us several projects, and look at that. Maybe this is a way to use E&D or something. The towns would all have to vote that that's what they'd like to see it go towards. So just letting you guys see long term, that's what we're beginning to peel back and let you see what's out there. Mount View really only has 2 things in the outlying years. The security cameras, we need more capacity in there. The part that controls all the cameras and deals with saving of footage and all that is relatively weak compared to the amount of cameras we have. In other words, it can't quite handle it. Furthermore, the support for it just isn't there. It was underspent on the head end for this whole thing when it should have got a better system in there. So, as we just said, this is what's in there to get replaced. There's also the perimeter sprinkling. So they have water sprinklers outside to make the lawn green and everything, everywhere except for inside where you drive around the building, closer to the building. And that stuff just burns, and it just it doesn't look good. So there's 40 grand in there. That's something that we could talk to the town and probably work with them to kind of see what they could pick up. That's a Holden thing. They would more than likely be on board with something like that. Central Tree, the roof is out in there. That's not a small number. That's something, because there's solar panels on there now, that we might wait till that thing's leaking like crazy and then deal with it. So, but due to the age of the roof, it was put in here. So that's a number that's in there. That certainly could get bumped out as we get down there. Same thing with the boiler and the pumps that are associated with it. That's sort of end of life cycle. So it's in there. If we're able to repair and you don't have to expend all of that, that's something that could get pushed out as well into outlying years, just so you're aware of those things. Let's go down, Dan, to Choxit here. Chockset has a variety of things. The Chockset Houghton are kind of at that stage in their lives where they're going to need a little bit of influx of money, and so this is some of the rooftop units that are up there. We've repaired some, we've replaced some, we've brazed some. It's just they're at a point where we need to start to replace some of these and put a unit in there that we just don't think about for like a decade, as opposed to, gee, it's been 10 weeks and it's the summer and that thing's still working. That's pretty good, that type of thing. There's some roof work there as well. That's half of it. The other half is down below with Houghton. There's windows that need to be replaced as well, and that's money's in there. So those are some of the big things that are in outlying years for that building. Thomas Prince is one of our buildings that's maybe in the roughest shape. So we had some stuff on the front end out here, but one of the real big things, it's here and it's at Paxton, that you guys should probably be aware of, and we probably need to ring these bells and shake these chains as much as you can and get the message out. There's no sprinkler system in that building, and there's no sprinkler system in Paxton. And when you think about students and safety, obviously an alarm will go off telling the kids to get out of the building, but sometimes if there's a fire, and at least if there's a sprinkling system, it can kind of suppress some of the noxious fumes that can be generated and allow people from the guts of the building maybe to get out and have a few more minutes to get out before they get overwhelmed. It's just in this day and age, all these buildings should have a sprinkler system in it. So that's not going to be cheap in either of these buildings. Here I was told it'll be over $1 million. In the next building, it's closer to $1.5 million. So, because it's bigger. So I'm just letting you kind of know about that stuff. Mike, what do you want to say there?
Due to the severity of that issue, could we look into moving that up significantly in years, if at all possible? And also,
yep,
I think it might benefit us to do that sooner as opposed to later due to cost increase.
Yep.
So all
you
around,
guys can look to move these up, and we can put them anywhere you want. This is something I'm sure you understand with town politics. You got to tell them about it, and then they're going to freak out about the cost, and then you got to circle back, and then maybe after a year or two they'll start, all right, we got to kind of start to think about how are we going to fund this? Is this an override? Are they going to vote on it? What is this? It's something that'll take a few years, so we can put it anywhere you want on this, but the message needs to get out, and we have to work with the towns to try to figure this out so we can get the message out to the people as well, so they understand we got to do this and just move on.
I think given the safety issue of it, it might be a little bit easier than maybe some other topics to have the town pitch in. I sure would hope so.
Yep.
I would encourage us to move it to within the next 3 years.
Okay.
Sure.
Dawson has a boiler somewhere in here. Yeah, there it is. It's the 400 at the end of this. That's really the big thing there. A lot of as you go down, Dan, on next school, Mayo, a lot of the schools here in Holden, their stuff is kept up, and the town has plans to look at it. So there's not a lot of costs in outlying years. Some of it's around like replacing desks or tables in the cafeteria. Same thing with Davis Hill. You'll see it's the same thing, Dan, if you go down to that. There's just not a lot out here in the outlying years. These buildings are pretty much, kept up by the towns. Naquag, there's some of the rooftop units need to be looked at and replaced. These are for ventilation. There is there's a section of roof that's in rougher shape than the rest of it, and it happens to be over the library, so that's in here. There's the main electrical panel here needs to get work as well. When we have power that goes out, it's always a challenge to get the thing to reconnect, and we just got to replace that and move on. And here at Naquag and at Paxton was refinishing of the gym floors. Those haven't been done in those buildings in a long time, and that needs to be stripped completely and redone. So I put one for 1 year, one for the other year, because we would pick that up as a district, the cost of those. Glenwood, Dan? Glenwood's in pretty good shape as well. Newer building. If we go down to Houghton, you'll see that Houghton's not quite in that shape. Houghton's it's feeling it as well. Similar to Choxet, there's some rooftop things. The roof as well. The windows are in there. And down the road, there is a boiler replacement issue that's in there. And that's pretty much it. In the cafeteria for outlying years, we have some $20,000 dedicated every few years so we could rebuild what they have for their funds in between. And they would be probably looking to use their money to sort of fund this. And that would be to start to replace some equipment. One thing I've been told by our director, Margaret Barton, is that we don't have a concrete plan of, because she said this thing's ancient. We were in a building where there would happen to be a water leak, and she was talking to me about a piece of equipment. She was happy it didn't leak on that, because she says that thing's ancient and it would just go. So there needs to be a plan where periodically there's some money available to replace the oldest equipment. And that's the plan, guys.
Linda.
Thank you for that.
Sure.
That's really good to have that long-term outlook. I have two questions. One is a smaller one, and that's I just noticed on the Houghton Choxet plan, there's no mention of the sidewalks, and I wondered if that's something that is just on a different radar than this one, or what. I know in front of Choxet, there's that like pooled area that can be a hazard in the winter and a nuisance in the spring. So that's one question. If that should go on, I don't know where that falls in terms of cost or planning.
I will add that to it. That's a good catch, because that is a problem. It doesn't leak into the building. When I first got here, it went down. It was one of my first visits to Choxet, and it happened to be this like flooding rain they had, and there was all this water in the main foyer. I'm like, what the heck is this about? And yeah, so the town worked to add some drainage there so it doesn't flood into there, but there still is an issue. There's some heaving. The doors don't open quite right in the winter, and you're right, it needs to get addressed. So I'll add that in there.
Thank you. And the other question is more of, towards the end of this plan, I see that like the high school has $300,000 4 years in a row. Those last like 3 or 4 years on the plan are some really heavy hitters for the total district. And so I was wondering about the thinking around that, if there's another way to ease it out, if you would normally expect it to kind of even out in a 10-year plan by the time you hit those years, or what is the thinking about those larger increases then?
It has to do with the units that sit on the roof. And a great way you can see this yourself, if you ever go to the high school, go up to where the kids all park. You sort of go up to the side and keep going up the hill till you get up as high as you can. And then as you're coming to maybe leave that area, you can see the whole roof of the entire high school complex, and you'll see all the things that are up there. They're aging out. Some of the big things you see up there are those $300,000 a piece units. They're very heavy. They got to get lifted off with a crane. They're expensive as it is. The problems we're running into is these things are getting to the point where they're reaching end of life, and we've got to do something about it. There's been some lightning hits up there. That's got to get taken care of, those types of things. So it's what it is. It's just the cost of having a building that's getting a little bit older. It's not like we just did a renovation 5 years ago. It's been a while ago that happened. So now these things are reaching that end of life. And you're right, Linda. Does it make sense for us to bite the bullet and expend a couple million one time, and it includes all that work? Then maybe it's spread out over 2 years, but we take the loan out and we just get going. Or that's where you guys would come in to give your advice on what you'd like to see and what you advise us in terms of your role makes most sense. So
If I can jump in there too, Bob, as the group knows, we refinanced our debt last summer, and we'll be looking to retire that debt, within 8 years, so 7 years now. Just look at this year. So not that I'm looking to pass on debt to the towns, but I'm just thinking that you know, those bigger heavy hitter projects will be happening at the same time that the debt will be retired. That perhaps you can look at borrowing to address those issues moving forward. It's just kind of coincidental that's happening. Just something to keep in mind. But I'll send you a postcard from the 19th hole. How's that? You can let me know how you made out.
Well, so that the other part of that too is that it's not just at the high school in those years. There's a number of those big ticket repairs or replacements at a bunch of the schools. So I guess I think that seems like a problem we know about that maybe we could address, spread out as a priority, you know.
Seriously, you could, Linda, and to the group, and obviously, you know, a couple years down the road, depending upon, you know, where the market is, you might even consider, you know, refinancing again. I mean, there's something that precludes that. Probably doesn't make any sense, but I think it would be very timely that as that older debt gets retired, that you look at some of these really big projects and say, now's the time to tackle those.
And Linda, I'd also add, I'm not sure that like the high school and ECC, where we have to figure out a way that we're going to finance this, with some of the schools, it means maybe something a little different, where we have to enter into conversations pretty soon to let the towns know, hey guys, here's what we're seeing down the road, just so you can kind of get your act together and maybe get it on some agendas that can get voted on, or funds are reserved or something like that, because we're seeing this as a big ticket down the road that you're going to have to absorb. So that's and that's the importance of having conversations, and on the town side, having long-term facilities plans that sort of meld with what we're seeing here.
Okay, so you have your hand up.
I wanted to bring up, is there anything anyone even thinking about, and I'm not sure if this would be the town or the district or how this would be handled, but two things: the parking lot at Naquag is in pretty rough shape, and the roof has been a concern in town for a long time. So I think those are top priorities, at least for the Rutland side.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up. I skipped over that. That is in the plan, is the resurfacing of the parking lot at Naquag. There's rebar sticking up through it. In Rutland as a whole, the curbing has been hit with the plowing and everything, and it's pretty beat up, in some cases broken, in some cases missing. So curbing and sidewalk work in all three schools is also in the plan. I'm glad you brought that up, Mike, and I completely spaced over it in my summary there to you guys, but we do have that listed in there. One of the top priorities in terms of all the schools, you're right, is Naquag in that parking lot. There has to be some work done there, especially in the back side of the building where there's rebar sticking up and everything. That's just got to get addressed. The roof over the library is the section of Naquag that has been identified right now to be sort of looked at. So
I can confirm, based on walking around my neighborhood, our curbs are taking a beating in town from our plows.
oh my goodness, yes. Yes.
Thank you.
So, Adam, I have a question about next steps. You know, in the time that I've been here, we've not brought forward a capital plan, and again, there are a couple of tweaks that we need to do here. But is it time now that, you know, we move this forward? I don't know, either to finance, or maybe it just goes to the full committee for their vote. I don't know, I'm just looking for some direction here.
So I think it makes sense for business and finance to look at it, especially for any of the items that fall on us, because those have a direct impact to the budget. So I think that would probably be the next step, and I don't know if it necessarily needs to be you don't necessarily need to approve it because it's something that gets approved in the budget in out years anyway.
Would this committee consider a recommendation? We as facilities and security support the advancement of this plan as presented to either finance or to the full committee. Again, just kind of thinking aloud. That's all.
Mike, go ahead.
I think that's a good idea. However, I'd like us to, I can email Bob and Dan my input. I'd like to see a few minor changes made, and then us basically look over it in a much quicker version again. And I was thinking maybe we could all vote to then recommend it to go off to the next committee, and then we can get the train rolling from there.
Yeah, I was going to recommend something similar. I think I would like to see this back here at least one more time. And basically, I mean, it's a big plan. It's taken us an hour and a half to go through it. It's not something we need to go into that level of detail, even for business and finance or the full school committee. I think it might make sense for administration to come up with a presentation that hits some of the key bullet points, and just kind of, next 2 years, these are the priorities. In the out years, these are the big ticket items. And then just have the plan available to everybody that they can look at it. If there's a specific question, they can bring it up. I think that makes sense. So I agree, bring it back here, look at it, and then, we can come up with some sort of statement that we've reviewed it and agree that it should, move on to the next subcommittee and full committee. Mike.
I'd like to suggest we have the administration do that presentation before Bob retires. I think it'd be valuable to have him as part of that.
You didn't know that he and I were a tag team? Walking
So
out the door together.
Bringing him back every once in a while?
What's that?
Does that mean you'll be bringing him back every once in a while?
No.
He'll just show up in the background.
We're walking out together. And now the end is here. And we did it our way.
Can't wait to post that on Facebook.
Now it's recorded. Oh man. Yeah, no, I mean, I would like to see at least the ideally an outline of that presentation. I don't know if it needs to be finalized for our next meeting, but I mean, it should really be, I would keep it fairly brief. 5 slides, the key points, and that's it.
And Adam, why do I think that there's a policy, and I'll stand corrected, where actually the capital is due to finance? I mean, this hasn't happened, but it's due to finance like the end of August. I mean, that clearly hasn't happened. Either we'll be really much ahead of schedule, or we're going to be really, really late.
Go for both. Go for 2. Yeah, take a quick peek if there is a policy that would be something maybe to address.
All right.
But I mean, at a point, I mean, this is something that, it doesn't hurt, now that we're discussing it publicly, that, give the towns a heads up, like, hey, this is what we're looking at. It may tweak, but we're on it.
And I think, Adam, that obviously we've missed the opportunity for the spring ATM, but certainly there may be something here that could be brought before a town for their fall ATM, especially after free cash is certified. Again, we talked about a lot here, but there might be that one project where perhaps we at least get it on a fall town meeting warrant, and I guess see what the public thinks of it. If it would fly or not, and but get it out there.
Yeah, I agree. Any other comments or questions? Nope. All right. Dan, Bob, thank you. I know there's a whole lot of work that goes into it, and we appreciate it. This isn't my first time going through this. I think it's the first time with Dan, and it's a much better setup and job and a lot more background to it. So I definitely appreciate it. Yeah, so thank you. Okay, what is next? Agenda. All right, review of policies. Let's see if we have access to view this. Since it's on the website, should be good. Bob, does it make sense for you to kind of lead this discussion? I know you've had probably more experience with policies than anybody else here.
Yeah, I can jump in with us there.
Okay.
So on the first policy here, facility usage for daycare programs, that's our policy 7113. When I read through that policy, it's very specific, and it actually defines a little bit of how I think they want the district to set up if we're going to run or support a daycare here. And I'm not sure that that's really what we're doing at all anymore. In fact, I wrote on my notes on this, like, is this really us? Are we really doing this? And that led me to kind of look back and say, like, well, what's the law around use of facilities in that? And so that's that chapter 71, section 71. And it basically says that as a body, as a school committee, you can set a policy in terms of how our buildings are to be used and what the requirements might be, those types of things. And they do list one qualification that it has to be without interference to the use of the premises by the schools. So, and I didn't quite see that in this one here. So then that led me to, well, MASC, the Mass Association of School Committees, must have some model policies. And so I identified two that they had. One is KF, community use of school facilities. And that's where they lay out a little bit of the philosophy at the top, and then who would be eligible and some preferences that are in there. And then their KF-R, that's the school committee's regulations, lists some requirements that are in there. And they have like 12 requirements in there, such as no smoking on properties and that type of thing. I did also look, I have some places I go to sometimes that help me out because they have people that take a very keen interest in policy, some other districts. One of those is Lexington Public Schools. And I did kind of like their policy when I read it because it kind of combined both of the MASC model policies into a single policy. They have their philosophy and they incorporated the regulations right into one, and it's a one-pager too. So that's kind of the work that I did behind the scenes to give you guys the resources there. Obviously, if we were going to use something like Lexington, we'd have to take some language out that references, their school committee and some particular memorandum they have in the town itself. So,
do we have another policy about community use of? I believe we do have another policy around use of the facilities, kind of outside of just daycare specifically. So if we
You
were to,
think it's in the 7,000s? I'll take a look here.
I believe so.
If we needed to do some background work on this, I could certainly go back to the drawing board and look a little closer. I didn't check all of our 7,000s. I was just trying to get us so we could respond to these ones that were in front of us here.
It might be just, is it 7110?
Yeah,
Just facility
facility
use.
use.
So I guess, I mean, my major question is at this point with the current facilities the district has, is this policy even appropriate anymore?
Around daycare, I don't think that that policy makes sense for us where we are right now. Maybe at one point that was the intent of the district, was to try to have that, but for us, it's not. It doesn't make sense right now.
Mike, you just raised your hand.
Would the, and I might be dating myself here, would the preschool program that I attended at ECC be basically what's described in here?
Yeah, Mike, I'm glad you brought that up. When I was reading it, there is a reference to preschool in some of the wording in this facility usage daycare program policy that we have, and it was written in 1998. So, I mean, it was written quite a while ago, and I believe that preschool does kind of take some of this, even though they're talking about some other outside agencies of the town, but they do talk about the district as a whole and what we're doing to sponsor daycare, and that's where it got. I don't think that's what we're doing at all now.
So I'd like to explore that and how it relates.
Yeah, in my work in education sub, what we do is sometimes when we find an older policy and it doesn't really have a home, we would look to have it removed or replaced with a new policy. It could be here that maybe the facility use policy that you have already existing, 7,110, maybe with some additional language that matches a little bit more with the models from MASC, might cover everything that we need, and we don't need this specific daycare policy 7113 anymore.
Yeah, the way I interpret it, this policy seems as though it's requiring that the district provide said services.
Yeah. And I know there was a daycare, I don't know if there still is, that operates out of the high school as well. Is that correct?
Well, it's a class that they do. It's a teaching class.
Right.
So it's up there. It's part of our educational offerings for for the students, but they do have, it's like preschool / daycare in there. Yeah, it's early childhood, of course. And there is an after-school program that happens in some of our buildings as well. I know for a fact at Dawson there's one.
Yeah.
I know Naquag and Glenwood have one.
And that's where the facility use, the model policy makes much more sense, because it talks about the responsibility of us granting permission. They still have to follow certain laws and regulations, and that all makes sense. That absolutely should come from school committee. But telling us we should be having a daycare, that's more of the district does not, and we have that, and this policy, I think, doesn't make sense anymore, this 7113.
Yeah, and also, I mean, the current preschool that we run, I mean, as I understand it, that school is basically required to be open, and we try to fill it with at least enough of students that are not special needs or whatever it is, in order to provide that mix for the other students.
Yep. There's some model students that are in there. There's peers that they need to have in there. There's part of the whole setup for us meeting the special ed needs of students that are in there. That's very much on the special ed side is pretty regulated as to what they can be. It just can't be anything that happens in there, including the hours that they're in session. So, and it's very different than daycare. That is actually a real preschool program that's in play.
Yeah. Okay. So I think my take on this is what makes sense is to do a really, really deep scrub of 7110 and roll any possible bits that may be needed from 7113 into it, but it'll mostly be kind of taken out because we don't see it as needing to require a daycare at this point, and then look at actual facility use and kind of model it, hopefully on Lexington's, where we can incorporate both parts of that.
Mike, what were you gonna?
So basically, what I'm, and you correct me if I'm wrong, what I'm hearing and what I'm thinking myself is we'll basically adjust that one policy to fit the needs of our current circumstance, and that we could have daycare programs in the schools. However, we will pretty much, for lack of a better term, phase out or get rid of the old policy that we're saying essentially requires us to have daycare.
Yeah, what we've done, what I've worked with other groups to do is they'll have a motion, and a motion might be to first reading of this policy, whatever it is, 7110, and it's here's your first reading. But then also associated with that would be the deletion of policy 7113. And there's no reading or anything. You would simply say it's outdated, doesn't make sense at this point in time, and we've taken anything from that and it's in 7110. So we've done that in Ed Sub, where we've taken different policies and either eliminated some, and in some cases we had to expand a single policy into 2 policies based on current laws and regulations. So yeah, that's what you guys would do. And after we do our work of the wordsmithing, and that's what I can bring to the next meeting. I'll examine 7110 and have some recommendations for you guys in terms of based on all these things.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure.
Linda. See your hand.
And actually, well, so there's some movement, it seems, about funding daycares and these kinds of programs potentially. So I guess that's something that I just want to have in the back of our brains is the possibility that it would be something we desirable in the future. Right now, it seems kind of out of left field, but that might be something that would be advantageous for the district to have down the road.
Linda, I think what we're looking at doing is getting out of the business of having a policy that's so specific and instead have a more general policy that says anything that you bring in, anything, you can decide what you want to bring in or the school committee can decide, but anything that's brought in has to meet these requirements, such as you cannot have drinking on school property, you can't have smoking, you can't do this, you have to abide by the existing laws, that type of thing. You have to let the school know 14 days in advance of any request to blah, blah, blah. It's setting that up so it doesn't really matter what's going to come in, what we might house. It's setting up the regulations, which is very much a school committee thing to do, is to set that in place. And then either the schools or the superintendent or the school committee decides what they would like to bring in then at that point or approve. But that's where I feel we need to sort of get out of a very specific policy that talks just about one thing and in fact is telling us we should be doing it. We should get out of that bit because we're not doing that at all, and have something that's more generic that talks about here's how you go about approving these things. They have to meet these things. You have to do this. So
That makes sense.
Yep.
Yep.
So I think actually 7110, 7112, which is non-district use of facilities, which I read as community use of facilities also. Also should, like both of those should be rolled into that one single policy. So we may end up wiping out all 3 policies and stick it in under one of them.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Is there any other discussion or action we want to take today on this policy? I think it makes sense to come back to it with the next meeting with some sort of proposal of where do we go with all of this information. Nope. All right. If not, let's move on to the next one.
So the next one is around emergency evacuation. When I looked at any law that might be around this, there's one that's very specific, and it talks about emergency plans that the district has to have in place, and what has to be in these plans, and how often they have to be renewed, those types of things. They're speaking to how we interact with varying support people and safety people during a crisis, as opposed to just how are we evacuating the building. So my takeaway was, once I read that, I feel that the policy 7158, emergency evacuation, might be too narrow in its focus. And instead, it might need to talk more broadly about what the district and the schools are expected to do to develop these emergency plans, a subpart of which is evacuation. Another part is, how do we set up and plan and work with communities and bring them into the planning with us and share the training amongst us? That's really where we're at. And that's all about it's taking a bigger picture than just the emergency evacuation. And the model policies that are there from MASC is emergency plans, and not so much emergency closings, but I threw that in there anyways just to see. But it's really around emergency plans. So did you want to start by looking at that? Did you want to review the law? What do you want to do?
So I think this is something that probably should have gotten just deleted back in 2015, because this is an old policy from the late 90s.
Yep.
It looks like in 2015, we came up with 7156, which is the emergency response plan.
Yep.
Which is a much more complete policy, and it references, MGL Chapter 69. Section 8A and others. And, it talks about getting the principals with the local police and fire chiefs, and fire drills, bus evacuation, other evacuation drills, which, if we have that, basically gets rid of the policy we're talking about.
Yep.
Lockdown drills, severe weather. So I think it may be better for us to refocus our efforts on that policy and then get rid of the other one. Because again, you end up in the point where you have kind of competing policies, and one of them's a lot better. So, I think ours is actually a more comprehensive than the MASC policy. So it may make sense to look at the MASC policy, see if there's anything we're missing for the areas that we go above and beyond. Does it make sense for that? I think they add in AEDs and CPR training, things like that, that isn't in our list or our policy from 5 years ago. But I think that's I'm all about getting rid of policies that don't make sense and, strengthening the ones that we have that do make sense.
So would you like me to do the same thing I'm doing with what we just finished, and to look in the 7000 series and see which other policies or policy is in there and reference that? And maybe this will be one that we decide ultimately that we're going to remove. What are your thoughts? And I could bring that to the next meeting as well. We could just jump in with policies at the next meeting, right off the get-go.
I believe, I think that's that's what I feel we should do. I don't want to necessarily take control and drive this train. If he has other input, I'm definitely open for it, but or drive the boat, as Dan said. Yeah, I like trains. He likes boats. Whatever. We're good.
I'm wearing on you, Adam. I'm wearing on you, brother.
But yeah,
Bus would be more appropriate.
there you go. Yeah, I think it totally makes sense to really come forward with kind of a complete proposal of, we'll take this policy, these are the changes we look to make, and also, we're pulling this part from this and getting rid of that policy completely.
Okay.
I think that makes sense. And if there's anything you would like me to help with that, let me reach out to me and let me know.
Sure. You and I could maybe meet and pre-plan the agenda, and I could show you where I'm at and what I'm thinking, and then you could give me a little guidance there, and to make sure it's meeting what we need to get work quickly, during a meeting and all that. So, yep.
All right. Anything else on the emergency evacuations and plans? Nope. You have another one that's the listing of all MASC policies. Is that something you wanted to talk about, or is that just a reference?
Yeah, what I wanted to let people understand is that it's becomes kind of challenging when we don't have references at the bottom of our policies to current laws and regulations, or cross-reference to other policies, and that's all set up for us in MASC in their model policies. So part of adopting a model policy is the words that are in there, but another important part of a model policy is also adopting at the bottom where the legal references and the cross-references are, because that certainly helps us, just like that, to be able to, well, what's the law say about what our authority is, and that helps to guide or to curtail sometimes conversations when you're trying to figure what you'd like to see in policy language. Because if it's not in your authority, then that's really cuts to the chase. Guess what, guys? That whole sentence you're trying to debate there and figure out the exact wording, you don't have the authority to say that. So that
it has to say.
Yeah. So that's my only point of putting that up there, was to draw people's attention to it. It's a great starting point for any of these conversations. And then to go back to the legal reference, that really sets up what your authority is and gives you your marching orders, as a school committee.
Okay. Any more discussion on the policies? Nope. So the next item, let's look at this as a whole, because we've been at this for 2 hours now. So we have the guidance document for the subcommittee functions and duties, an update on full in-person learning, and then a budget update on the ESSER grant. And I would actually like to enter executive session for probably 2 minutes at the end of this, just for a really quick item. So I guess out of the next 3, I don't know if we necessarily have the time or willpower to get through all of it. What is everybody's opinion on what we want to hear about? I'm willing to put off the functions and duties while I think it's important. I think we could discuss it next time. So I guess unless anybody disagrees, I'm going to pass over item 5 on the agenda.
I'd really like to focus on the return to in-person learning, since that just occurred this week. Hear updates and whatnot.
Yep, I agree. Dan, did you have a comment, or was that your comment?
No, I'll reserve it for later. I do have a comment, but I'll make it later before we break. That's all.
Okay. All right. So seeing no disagreement, let's move on to item 6, the update on return to full in-person learning.
So I think the principals have done a heck of a job. I know everybody's stressed. The teachers are doing a great job. It's been relatively quiet the first few days here, and I think that shows a lot of the prep work and thinking and planning that's gone into play, as well as um, getting the resources together to make this happen, including desks, spacing, all those types of things, setting up protocols, staging areas, the cafeteria. Everything ran a little bit slower than people liked the first day. I got initial reports back that buses ran a little smoother the second day, that the cafeteria lines moved quicker the second day. So I think you give them a week or two, and I think we'll be back to where people are feeling, all right, we got this kind of under control, and it's making sense. In and out of bathrooms, those breaks, all that type of stuff. It's making it's working well. We've met the state requirements. I worked with the principals and teachers to revise multiple schedules so that we made sure that we were ensuring 25 hours of in-person, or I'm sorry, of instruction that was happening during the week. We are still working with the high school in terms of getting desks there. Tomorrow we're probably going to order well over 200 desks to get to put into the high school. We've got a quote and everything, so we'll be working on that. That's still a pretty big outlier right now, is getting them with the desks that they need. Mike, what's your question?
Are we purchasing those desks, and is there a plan of where to store them since we're taking on more stuff?
Yeah, I'm not sure we're going to store them next year, because I kind of feel unless they unless they get away with the requirement of the 6-foot distancing, that we'll have to use those in any space that kids eat, because the tables we typically use, they just take up too much room for the number of kids that can sit around it at 6 feet of spacing. So I think we'll still be using desks for at least another year in our cafeterias. So
Okay.
that's kind of where I'm at. I think those are all positive things. A lot of problem solving went on, and to the credit of a lot of people, we were able to get through it. And I think as we move on, people are going to feel they're back into normal, even though it's not normal. But this is what we were trained to do. This is how we work with kids, etc. We've got computers that we ordered so that we can get more Chromebooks into the hands of kids in the elementary schools. And that's especially important if MCAS still happens. We have to have the ability to have multiple grades be able to take MCAS online across the district. We can't just have that school doesn't have Chromebook cards, so we'll work with this school. We have to have them in play in every school, so multiple grades can take MCAS online. So we're doing that. We've ordered more, and part of us being able to order more Chromebooks and get them in the hands of the elementary kids, the reserve we have right now, was from taking money that we had spent in our technology budget and putting it into the ESSER 2 grant. And then Dan and I have sat down and we're moving money back in, so that freed up money inside of technology so that we could turn it right into Chromebooks here. So there's a lot of movement that happens. It's exciting from my end. It might be frustrating from Dan's point, because essentially, in this case with technology, and they're reclassing some of these expenses 2 and 3 times. In other words, he expends it, I move it out of his expense into an earlier grant. We had the technology reopening grant. He expends it, I'm moving it into the ESSER 2 grant. He expends it, and hopefully we can move it into the ESSER 3 grant. So it's a lot of work on Dan's end with his crew to move the accounting part around, but on our end, it's exciting that we're able to leverage a lot of these different funds that way. So I'd give it 2 thumbs up in terms of the reopening. We had a lot of work behind the scenes, and I think it's paying off, and that it's working as smoothly as it has. I'm not saying it's perfect, but it's worked pretty good.
Good. Dan, did you have something to add?
Yeah, well, just in terms of the accounting, that's what we do. It's our job, and we just do it. That's all, and we get it done as quickly as we can. It enables us to do what Bob needs to get done next. That's all. It's my world. It's our world. It's all good. It's all good. Secondly, I just wanted to make a comment. Maybe you talked about this at the last meeting about the desk. Did you mention this at all, Bob, about the Spencer's Brookfield?
Yes.
Right. So
I
okay, and I just want to give a shout out again to Spencer's Brookfield. You know, to my former student, I guess I taught her well. To Missy Farrow, my student, and also to Gary Suter, the business manager. They gave us 250 plus desk and chairs and on loan through the end of the year. And I also, and again, maybe you spoke about this, but I want to seize the opportunity to give a shout out to the guys from the high school. You know, we met them at 7 o'clock a week ago, U-Haul and Worcester. We got a couple of trucks, and those guys, they did yeoman's work. We thought it would take us 2 days, and they got those desks from a couple of schools out in Spencer's Brookfield, 2 schools here in the district, and again, Mark Wild, Matt Gull, Bill Gregatis. I apologize if that's incorrect. Colin Coffey, Brian McCullough, Chris McLaughlin, and John Wyszynski. Again, I apologize if that's incorrect. But I want to take a moment publicly and thank those guys because they worked hard in 1 day, and we planned it for 2 days, and they got it done. They got it done in 1 day, and that wasn't easy work. So I just want to take that moment and say thank you to them, and again to Spencer's Brookfield for helping us out. And I can't forget my colleague down in New Bedford either. He was willing to give us some desk and chairs. It's just that Spencer's Brookfield said, "Hey, we're here. We can help you. They're right next door," and we seized the opportunity. So it's all good. Okay, I'll get off my soapbox again.
No, that's excellent. I mean, absolutely, everybody involved in that, you know, we sincerely appreciate it because it's a huge expense for us and hassle that we didn't have to go through. I mean, so it absolutely helps us out in a very short time frame. Like, we wouldn't have gotten those desks in if we had ordered them. So it was a huge help. Linda, I see you had a question.
So 2 unrelated questions. One was a question about the, well, actually, first, just to say, I think this is definitely an instance of no news is good news. So I'm glad to hear that everything has been quiet and going smoothly. And I mean, you know, you got to remember too, there were a sizable number of kids, I think, who this was their first day of school in the buildings. And, you know, what a difference it is from saying, okay, it's time for school, go upstairs to your desk, versus, okay, it's time for school. Now we're going to get in the car. Do you have your masks? Do you have this? Do you have that? Do you remember how you go through the cafeteria line? I mean, that there's just so much more than head on back up. So, you know, first day of school is always remembering everything. And it's been not just summer break, it's been a solid year plus. So, you know, it makes sense that it would be a little bit rocky that first day, but that it would smooth right out. So that's good to hear. So my question is about the bus routes. I know heading into this Monday, there was the request of not looking for changes. Is that request to wait being lifted? Are K through 8 kids able to change their preferences of bus versus walk or drop off? Or does that still need to kind of be on hold for a little bit?
We froze all bus routes until Monday, and then we'd start to look at requests at that time. And depending on the bus and how full it was, some we might be able to move quicker on than others. So if we've got to essentially redistribute kids from one bus to another, because now adding this extra kid means they're over capacity or at capacity. So we got to not pick these kids up with bus 12, bus 7 will come get them at this time. So we'd have to start changing things up. So in some cases, it's a little bit of a spider web. In other cases, no, there's plenty of room on a bus. And okay, we're going to make one additional stop down here to pick this kid up. All right, there we go. The kid can get on, no problem. So we're starting to move on those, but everything was on hold until the 5th because we published what the routes were, and then we had to hold to that and honor that and let people at least start the week off. So now we're starting to look at those, and some changes could happen. So in terms of people that are requesting, they'll probably see that some of their requests will be met. In terms of people that think this is the, bus 13 is picking my kid up every day right here, and suddenly it might be a different bus at a slightly different time that will be getting the kids, because we have to change routes and all that. So it's just a reality of where we're at.
So Linda, it's also, we're getting back to, I guess, the old normal, so to speak, maybe sooner than later, where just in terms of the busing, have a full tank of gas, we'll hop in my car and we'll run out and look at bus stops. Just as Bob said, we had to just get through the first couple of days, and as requests come in and they get bounced from AA to Carolyn Holden to me, I'll be heading out wherever and checking out the bus stops, and then getting back to AA, and talking about those requests. So there is a sense of normalcy that's very much on the horizon.
I agree. I'm sure that there are kids who are seeing those parent pickup lines and families saying, "Oh, well, maybe we should get on that bus." So my other question was just about the Chromebooks, and I was wondering what the I guess the outlook is for getting more in for elementary. Like, would there be something that we could, I guess, is there movement for getting it done faster? Is there like urging a higher priority to getting the Chromebooks in the elementary? Or is it really, are we at a hard stop where you're pushed out to the limit by budget or timing? Would it make sense to look for, can we order more? Can we get more in faster, push up the timeline at all?
So let me answer that question by explaining what we did this year. So we knew we were going to expand the number of Chromebooks in kids' hands and go to 1-to-1 from grades 6 through 8. So we ordered those extra computers to make that happen. And once we saw that we had grant money coming in, we also saw the delay that was expected. It was months out. So at some point, it was a couple weeks, maybe 4 or 5 weeks after we kept inquiring about the order, and they're like, "No, guys, you're like 3 to 4 months out." What we said is, we better get our order in for the following year's freshmen. So actually, we had a whole grade set, 600 Chromebooks, sitting that we were ready for next year's freshmen coming in, that we didn't have to worry about not showing up. And those came in over the last several like maybe a month ago. We got all of those in, and there was a couple month wait for those as it was. We're using those to push into the elementaries, and we're using the money that I was able to pay back to technology with the ESSER 2 grant to purchase now for next year. They're saying the delivery and the turnaround is not what it used to be, so we fully expect to have those on site before we start grade 9 next year, and we're able to put those in kids' hands and be off and running. So that's what we've done, and we made that call about 2 weeks ago, and we're starting to push those machines out into the elementary schools. So I think we're going to have enough to meet our needs here. We're not going to be 1-to-1 at that level, but we have enough to get it in so that we can meet the demands of the MCAS online time frame, and people will still be able to take it. we have to at least assure that. At this point, we don't know that MCAS would be canceled or postponed. We have to go with what's right there now in front of us, which is, hey, we pushed it out a month, but you still got to take it. So we're good to go on that front. So that's what we're using.
Is there any, I guess, philosophy maybe on bringing the one-to-one like program down to like 3 to 5, grades 3 to 5, something like that? Or is there a real desire to keep it at a Chrome cart level versus a one-to-one level?
Linda, that's a good question. Here's what I see. I see in the classroom teachers that maybe were a little bit apprehensive when we were thrown out of the schools and you got to figure this out in your home and you have to use this stuff. I see now where they're like, I like this. I want to continue to use this online platform. Maybe not as much as I was, certainly, but I want to have kids have the opportunity to get in, to still collaborate remotely, to post their work, to access, these resources. They still would like to keep some of that. So I think down the road, we certainly need to grow in that direction as a district. We're not far off. From 6 on up now, we are one-to-one. Putting more devices like this in play, that would certainly help. Knowing that we're getting additional money through this ESSER 3, and it's supposed to be, $1 to $2 million in that range, we certainly could peel off a chunk to make that happen, maybe 3, 4, and 5. So they could be one-to-one. That's a discussion I think we need to have with the teachers involved as well as the school leaders involved, is to see, does that make sense for us? Are we pushing things too far? And I think we also have to get some input from parents. Parents might feel, you know what, that's way too much screen time. Or they might say, you know what, I don't mind it being one-to-one as long as the kids are having opportunities to be away from the screen during the school day. And maybe there's select opportunities where they're going to be online and use this program or that. So we've got to gather input from all those folks and decide what makes sense for us as a district. The good news is I think we have the financial opportunity here that if we decided to go in that direction, we could make it happen without stuffing it in the budget or cutting something else from the budget to liberate the funds. This is a unique opportunity right now.
And actually, that is exactly what I was going to ask. Well, not exactly, but a good segue. So, so we got way ahead on our one-to-one plan, right? So, is there any way to kind of take those planned for dollars and push them into some other maybe facilities work or other buckets that is there any idea of where those might get moved? Would it be within what we would cover here or elsewhere? Just kind of wondering, because we got, instead of the 7-year plan or something like that. I'm thinking of the textbook plan was 9 years, but I don't remember the number of years for the technology plan.
What we did is we wrote.
Go on.
We've written 2 different tech plans, and they're both around 5 years in length. We were actually a little bit behind the timeline, and then this year allowed us to catch up and get ahead. Now, here's what's different maybe from like textbooks or something. What's embedded in the technology plan is 3-year borrowing, and there's money that you pay each year. So if we were just a step away, there really isn't like a savings with technology, because next year, what's the money being used for? It's paying year 2 of this loan. It's paying year 1 of this loan. It's paying year 3 of that loan. That's what's in there. So even if we stayed the course with technology, it's not like they have this extra money. They're still paying on things that we had borrowed. And the level that we were sort of into technology was actually, it was behind where our plan was. So this grant funds that we've received have allowed us to catch up and get a little bit ahead. We still have financial commitments that are in there in terms of the borrowing that we've done. So going forward, the good news is we'll be able to move some of those into funding new purchases of technology to keep these things relatively up to date. High school will have the newest ones, and then they'll move down to some other levels, and that's how we'll sort of make it work. down the road, 4 years out, 3 years out. I've also put into some of these grants money that's specifically earmarked towards facilities. And that has allowed us to get ahead and get some projects done, such as catching up with all these HVAC repairs. Oh my goodness, we've caught all that stuff up. So that's something that doesn't have to necessarily show up down the road in long-term planning. So that money can be used for other projects in terms of facilities. So I think that was one of the good things we did early on with these grants. We didn't throw it all just at one thing. Every one of these grants is funded multiple areas. This last grant, the ESSER 2 grant, I think it's in 11 different areas. We put money. Some of it's just small amounts of money, but it's in a whole bunch of different areas in there, including facilities. And that was one of the biggest areas. There was 150,000 we put into facilities. And I think it was only 124 we put into tech, even though that's a lot of money. But I think facilities is where we put the biggest chunk of the money into.
I have the grant here. I mean, I can give you a 50,000 foot overview, or you can take Bob's word for it and say, let's move it along, guys. Okay, how about them Red Sox? Okay.
Yeah, either way. I mean, I'm good on skipping the details of it unless anybody wants to get into it. Okay.
I'll give you a summary at the next meeting, a summary sheet, and you can look at it because it does impact facilities, and you guys should know what I put in there and how it's working. So,
no, that's a good idea. Is there anything else on the return to full in-person learning? Like you had listed here a couple items: bathroom petitions, plexiglass shielding. We covered the desks.
Yep. We finished the shielding other than the high school. We finished the bathroom petitions across the district, and that happened on Sunday. That was the last day. That was a lot of planning and no, move on. No, we can't do that. I got to pull you off of this. So now we're circling back to some of those things that we had to push aside to get the petitions done. The reason we have petitions on the bathrooms is so every single stall can get used, every sink can get used, all those types of things. So.
Okay. All right. Anything else on return to full in person? Nope. All right. Any other details on the ESSER grant we should go over?
No, I'll give you a summary next meeting. You guys can see all the details there. Yep.
Okay. So the next item is new business. Anybody have anything? We have a couple things from our meeting last time that we do need to bring forward to the next meeting.
Adam, you and I will hook up and you're going to give me anything like that and we'll put it on the agenda and make sure we don't miss it when we're planning the agenda for the next meeting.
Yep. All right, so no other new business. Our next meeting. Problem with so many accounts is you don't know which one has your real calendar. Full calendar. So actually, we are in the final stretch of this session of the school committee.
Yeah.
Town elections start mid-May.
Yep.
Right? Is that right?
Yep.
So basically, once we hit there, we're pretty much done.
Yep.
Got like another 5 weeks. So given that, I mean, I know not everybody's I don't think anybody's looking for lots of meetings. So I would like to get a couple more in and get these efficient if possible. But I think we're also doing some important work in setting it up for the next iteration of this subcommittee as well. So,
You leaving us, Adam?
I am so. It's been a good
Well,
6
watch what you say. You're on the meeting.
it's been a 6
Say
year.
it's not so.
Are you hanging up the cleats?
I am. I'm gonna move on to bigger and better things. We'll see. I'm sure I'll still be around. You guys won't get rid of me that easily. But
What
yeah.
dates are you thinking for the next meeting here, Adam? Did you want to try to get one in April? Because you're right. Once we get into May, we got to be mindful of the town meetings, and we can't.
Yeah. Man. So looking at it, we've got April vacation right smack in the middle of this. But then I think I actually have a business trip the week after. It's like my first one in forever. But Mike, did you have something?
No, I was saying business trip.
I was giving you some air quotes there, buddy.
I haven't gone on a business trip since last March. So yeah. Be going down to Quantico, Virginia. Super fun. All right, so
What about the week of the 26, 27, 28, 29, that sort of days? Anything in there?
yeah, that's the week I'm gone.
You're gone?
My meeting is the 27th, 28th. I think I could actually do the 29th. I think that might work. Because I think the only other option is to try to do it like the 15th, and I'm not sure that works for any of us coming up that quick.
So
I
April
think we'll
15th.
prepare everything.
Put this out there. So, Thursdays are hard
Okay.
for me. I will attempt it. There's been a time change with my classes because they're in Arizona, but Thursdays are difficult.
Okay.
That out there. If you need to, cool. I'll be here for half the meeting like I was before.
Actually, what I could do. Is there a school committee meeting on Monday the 26th?
There is this. Yeah.
Yes, there is.
Because that one I could actually, I guess either the 27th or 28th, I could do it from a hotel room. We're all remote anyway, so.
Yep.
So yeah, I could do either of those dates.
I have a conflict on the 27th. Did you? That was one that you said. Is it just not a good idea to try to do it during April vacation? Is that just like super mean, or does that
fine with
open
it.
things up?
We actually
I
had a
could.
meeting. We had a meeting back in February vacation. I think that Tuesday night, the 16th. Bob and I are tested veterans here. You just tell us, we'll be there.
I mean, I'm open to it, but it's up to you guys.
Let's do it.
If it works for the group, I mean, it's not a problem for me, but if it's a problem for someone else, I don't want to.
Which
I don't
day are
wanna
you
push
guys looking at that week?
The week of April vacation, I could do Monday through Wednesday.
The Wednesday would probably be the best day for me, but
Which week's that?
Wednesday the 21st we're talking about, guys?
Yep.
yeah.
Fine with me.
And the time? Does 7 still work? Or do we want to look at a different time?
7 still works. I don't know if you guys want to try to do it a little earlier. so we can wrap up earlier, or if you have conflicts, does just at least a half hour bump it up to 6:30?
Earlier is fine.
Okay.
Okay.
Mm.
All right, that sounds good. So Bob, I'll try to get with you either end of this week or next week, so I'm not pulling you multiple days out of April
Yep.
vacation. So, okay. All right. Let me just pencil that in.
I'll send you an email, Adam, with some times, and you tell me what works for you and dates and stuff, and we can plan out the agenda and go from there.
Okay, that sounds good. All right, so the next thing, I'd like to make a motion to enter executive session to discuss the deployment of security personnel or devices or strategies with respect thereto. As I deem a discussion in public session would have an adverse effect on the district's position, and we will not return to public session.
So moved.
Oh, I made the motion, but you can
Oh. Second.
All right, so any discussion? Nope. Okay, Krista.
Yes.
Mike
Yes.
and Linda.
Yes.
Okay, so we will enter public session. So Dan, could you stop the recording?